Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Cision webinar, Cision Communications Cloud, Uncover Your Audience's Influencers. I'm Mary Morgan Lamperis, and your moderator for today. During today's webinar, you'll learn how to differentiate between targeting social influencers and traditional journalists, leverage best practices for more successful social media pitching, and apply social media research to your targeting and messaging strategies. Before I introduce our presenters, I'd like to cover a few quick housekeeping points. There will be a moderated Q&A at the end of the webinar, so feel free to use the Questions tab on your webinar panel to submit them. And we will be sending out a recording of the slides and the webinar after. You'll receive that from us in a couple days, so don't worry, we will get this out to you so you can use the content going forward. And now let me introduce our speakers. Valerie Lopez is Cision's Vice President of Media Research, where she manages our media database of over 1.6 million media outlets, influencers, and editorial opportunities. Outside of work, she's known for spending hours researching the latest gadgets and uncovering Chicago's hidden foodie treasures. Stacey Miller is Cision's Director of Communications, leading a team of internal and external communicators while managing the strategy and execution of media, influencer, and analyst relations, social media, and community development. Outside of work, Stacey enjoys attending concerts and working on her cars. And now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Valerie and Stacey. Welcome to the webinar.
Thanks so much, Mary Morgan. I really appreciate that. And we're so excited to talk to everybody today about targeting influencers and why these relationships are so key to our communications programs, because these relationships really harness the fact that influencers inspire other people to act and can act on behalf of our brands or other organizations. So if you think about it, we've been doing influencer marketing since the beginning of time. We just didn't really call it that, right? So sharing information with friends and colleagues that might be likely to take those messages and then share them with other people as well. It's pretty simple. But the industry is catching on. More and more brands are engaging in influencer relations to really augment and pump up their PR and marketing communications programs. And there are some really astounding stats to support why we're so interested in influencer marketing today. So I want to go through a little bit of the why before we get to the how. So some really compelling stats here. 92% of people trust recommendations from individuals, even if they don't know them, over brands. 37% better retention is reported for customers acquired through word of mouth. 47% of users are influenced in their purchases by social media. So they see something on social media that someone else posts, they're more likely to buy it. And 81% of marketers and communicators who have used influencer marketing have judged it to be effective, meaning that they've seen business results from it. So as you can see, influencer targeting and marketing can support a variety of business goals, from within our comms departments, extending outwards to other departments like customer service and sales. So working with influencers can boost brand awareness and get your brand's name in the faces of people who haven't heard about it before. It can educate the masses. If you have a B2B brand that may be a bit more complicated to explain about what you do, you can about it. It'll increase SEO authority and search rankings. So when people are looking for something like your brand or organization, people are more likely to find it based on the conversations that influencers are having because they rank more highly in search. Grow social communities. So if one of your goals is to grow bigger communities on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or one of your other primary social media networks that's best for your brand, influencer marketing is also great for that. Helping mitigate crises. This is one that I think some brands haven't quite thought about yet, but it's something that we've discovered at Cision, is that having a good roster of influencers on your side can help advocate for you during a time of crises and help bring down those negative conversations and advocate for your brand. Establishing trust and credibility. Maybe you're trying to expand your awareness into an industry or a group of people that you haven't traditionally spoken with before, and you need to establish trust with those people. Enable more content. This is a really great one. It shows how influencer marketing really spills over into other departments. If you need content, you're interested in content marketing, maybe you don't have the bandwidth internally to create some great resources, influencers can also help you create user-generated content that you can then use to promote your brand. Driving traffic to your website and other properties that are important to you. and breaking through the noise. There's so much noise on the internet today. Good friend Mark Schaefer calls it infobesity. It's really hard to get your messages seen due to the amount of information that's on the web today, as well as just, there's too much information and there's a lot of competing messages. So being one of the people that rises through to the top, encouraging loyalty and advocacy. Again, people trust people that are like themselves. So influencers can help you gain new clients, retain those clients, and have them advocate for you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to distinguish between the social influencers and the traditional influencers. I think today we can really consider journalists influencers because, like social influencers, they inspire others to act and they shape the narrative. But there are a few key distinctions between the two, which Val is going to help us go through in just a sec. So in an era of social media, anybody can be an influencer as long as they inspire others to act. That's the key thing to remember. So when we talk about niche topics, we mean super specific. Rather than just looking for travel influencers, influencers are covering backpacking in Greenland. Instead of covering real estate, they're covering condos in Manhattan. So these influencers are everywhere, and they're not bound to employment with a traditional news source. So their publishing platforms are social media, their blogs, their live streaming. They're all these new mediums that we're talking about. And they have the ability to cover news faster than many traditional news sources. That being said, the news cycle is 24/7, and journalists are competing with these influential news sources. So that it goes hand in hand with that influx of information that I was talking about earlier. And many specialize in those niche topics, and they're more receptive to details which a general interest news source would only cover sporadically or reactively. So being as specific as possible with the type of content that you're sharing with influencers is one of the big differentiators.
Thanks, Stacey. So this is Val here. So just to add to what Stacey was saying, we're seeing that trust has been moved from the outlet to the reporter or the influencer, meaning that people used to just look to the New York Times as someone that's super influential. It's the New York Times, right? Anything that they put out, you want to trust. But now more and more people are looking at the actual reporter or the influencer who's reporting the news. You sort of match that name with trust. And that's how social media has really shifted sort of PR and just mainstream media. And we also have noticed that a lot of former reporters are looking for good stories to tell. So they feel like they have more freedom over social media, and it's, for a lot of bloggers, it's not a hobby, but it's a business as well. So I just wanted to add that to Stacey's last slide. The next couple of slides, we're going to talk about the State of the Media report. So Cision, every year, we survey a handful of journalists, hundreds, in fact, of journalists, bloggers, and influencers. And we take a look back at trends that happened within that year, how they use social media, how they work with PR professionals, and just any challenges PR professionals and communication professionals can expect in terms of challenges. So for this past year, the last media report we put out, we surveyed a little over or close to 400 global journalists. And what we're finding is that social media is still an effective tool. Journalists and influencers still use it to build relationships, promote, market, and also to monitor public opinion and connect with readers. But they do see the challenge with incorrect information being posted on social media, and it's a really big challenge for them. And I think today we just see that in today's media landscape. It's faster isn't always better. They struggle with wanting to put out information but wanting it to be right. Another thing we're seeing with social media, and I would say with traditional outlets and journalists, is that there's competition. Typically, if you're maybe a weekly newspaper, your demographic, subscribers, it's an older demographic. Where with social media, it's that coveted millennial demographic. More people want their information via social media, and it's a better way to engage a younger audience. And then that equals more subscriptions. And then this isn't surprising. The PR-journalist relationship is still important. Despite technological changes, we haven't seen a shift in the way journalists and influencers work with PR professionals. They understand that they still need them. They just want to see improvement in how we communicate with them and how we tell our story. I don't know if this is surprising or not, but press releases are actually still their number one sort of valuable information that they want to receive from PR professionals. I think some people may think that press releases are a bit antiquated, but they're not. They're really great for story leads, and we actually have a lot of smaller, local, regional papers and stations that actually request press releases via fax. So fax is actually still a way to get information. This next slide, it kind of frames what we're going to cover in the next hour. I think some of you may feel like it's maybe too 101, or it's too much of, oh, well, we already know all these best practice stuff. But time and time again, I've been with Cision for over 10 years. I've talked to journalists daily, and they give us their pet peeves. They tell us how they want to be communicated with. So this slide basically shows you what I think we've all known, that almost all respondents want to be communicated via email. That's the main method of communication. They're just on a go. It's easy to access via phone. It's just easy for them. Engaging with them for phone, that came in a distant second, and they actually don't prefer it. In terms of how will they follow up with a pitch, what makes them follow up with a pitch? It's having all of the information available to them in one go. We'll talk a bit about that later and how to craft the perfect pitch. And there are areas where they've told us that they still want to see improvement. And I think the basic theme with that is with research and doing your homework, knowing what they cover, researching and understanding the outlets. Those are the two main things we constantly hear from journalists and influencers today. So we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to get your message, your story, your email noticed.
And so there are other types of influencers after we talk about journalists and after we talk about social media influencers as well. And I want to make sure that everybody's aware and considering these in their targeting strategies. So the first one, we're not going to pay too much attention to because they're celebrities. And while these influencers are instantly recognizable, they have a massive, massive audience, and partnering with them can really expose your brand to new prospects, you have to pay celebrities quite a bit of money, and you have to be cautious of this because your audience can sometimes view these celebrity sponsors as inauthentic. Journalists, which we were just talking about, your audience looks to these journalists to inform them of the most important and relevant news. So your brand's outreach for any type of influencer targeting should include journalists, but also be newsworthy, relevant, and interesting enough to catch their attention. The next type of influencer is social media influencer, which I think most brands kind of focus on, and it's kind of one of the easier ones to find and target and engage with. So from YouTubers to Instagram personalities, people on Twitter and Snapchat, these people gain popularity online and discuss what's new, what's trending, and they have very niche topics, like I mentioned earlier. So you can reach out to these influencers to share your products or services. They can create content for you if it's something that aligns with them, and they'll become one of your brand ambassadors. Experts. Experts are one that I worry that we don't consider in the influencer circle. And so these influencers are known as credible resources in your industry. They could be on social media, that might not be on social media, but they could be doctors, they could be scientists, they could be professors, CEOs, any of these types of professionals who are well educated and they share their ideas and their opinions. They have tons of experience. So engage these experts in conversations that surround your brand, and their perspectives will be really valuable to your audience and oftentimes more valuable to some industries versus others. So out of these types of influencers, you might only find one or two that's applicable to your industry. The last one is organic advocates. So these influencers are similar to social media influencers, but they haven't quite reached that influencer status. They're not someone that you could name and a bunch of people would know. Instead, they have a bit of a smaller audience, but they're kind of the friends of the friends who are already fans of a brand and talking about that brand online. Just because they don't have a massive, massive following doesn't mean that they can't inspire people to act. So the example that I put here was of my friend Christine, and she's advocating about a product, And while she's not a massive personality, because she recommended that product, I'm more likely to purchase that product. So in essence, she becomes an influencer by way of her organic advocacy. So the point I want to kind of make here is there's a lot of influence that comes from friends and family. So the best influencers, when you're searching and when you're targeting and evaluating which ones you really want to partner with, the best ones really make their audience feel like they're friends and like they're a part of their family. This is what social media really enables. So influencers that do this, they create content and a connection that's truly one-to-one. And like I said earlier, people trust other people that are like themselves. So finding an influencer that's more like your target audience will, in fact, earn more trust.
So let's dig into how we can use Cision Communication Cloud to find your influencers, uncover your influencers. Stacy will talk a bit about finding the right influencers, but I just wanted to show you that I think a lot of people are familiar with database services, but it's a great way to start your list, right? You're not basing it on maybe like one topic, or it's just one outlet, or it's just one location. Cision allows you to find a combination of all those things. So you can sort of mix and match. You can build on this search to find the best people that fit your brand and your audience.
So more on finding the right influencers. This is probably one of my favorite parts about it because I get a lot of questions about how do I find the right influencers? How do I determine what is true influence? This person has 1 million followers. Does that make them influential? And my answer immediately is no. Don't judge an influencer just based on the number of followers they have. Those numbers can be pretty deceiving. There's bots. You can buy followers. There's a lot of deception that can occur in the social media world, unfortunately. So you need to look for people who are inspiring their communities to act. So what we've done is we've kind of done a lot of research and we've developed a couple of really key factors to look for when you're researching your influencers, either using the cloud or while you're doing your own research. So the first factor to look for is reach. So how big is the influencer's audience? So making sure that they have a significant enough following to make an impact. But don't be afraid to consider those people with the smaller communities or who might be considered micro-influencers. They may be able to make a bigger difference if their audience is more engaged. Remember, it's about making people act, not necessarily about how many people the message goes to, because sometimes people won't see the message at all. The second factor to look at is engagement. Look at their profiles and take a look at how engaged their audience is, meaning, do they participate in conversations? Are they talking back and forth? An engaged audience really shows that the influencer is successful at communicating their message and, again, motivating their followers to take action. That is the theme of this presentation, taking action. So this is more important than reach by itself. The third thing to look at is topics of coverage. So this is pretty simple. You want to make sure that you pick an influencer who's actually interested in your brand or organization and what you stand for. So what is the influencer actually talking about? Determine their commonly discussed topics and then delve really deep into the details. So don't just look for influencers discussing a broad topic like sports. An influencer could be a sports journalist, but if they only cover tennis and you're looking for football, obviously they won't be the right match. So being as specific as possible in your search and then scanning for those things throughout your search. The next factor is original content. So look at what the influencer is actually writing themselves. So one kind of tip is that you'll find people who will fake influence that maybe have fake followers and they have a large audience, but then you'll notice that they're sharing a lot of content and you're like, oh my gosh, this person creates a lot of content. But if you look closely, some of the content might actually be retweets or aggregated content from other sources, and they're actually not creating content themselves. And that's a telltale factor to someone who has fake influence. So make sure that they are creating their own content, that their ideas line up with your brands. And then if you can have that influencer create their own content on behalf of your brand or something that aligns with your brand's beliefs, then you'll benefit from that influence. The next factor to look at is geographical location, something else you can see in the cloud. So what region is the influencer located in? Are you a local business that's only looking to target a specific region, or are you working nationally? Make sure that you're looking at where they are, what type of audiences are there, and are those really the people that you want to reach? If you're in Texas, you might not want to choose an influencer that's in New York if you're targeting Texas people. That's a simple way to put it. So make sure that the experts in the target geographic area are interested in expanding your brand presence in that area. Culture and demographics. So in order to reach new audiences, it's really important to tailor your message by age, gender, lifestyle, or education. So really knowing the audience. And I hope that as I'm speaking about all these factors, this really helps you relate to your media relations best practices and researching journalists, because it's very much the same. So making sure that you understand all of these factors and you consider them will influence how your audience responds to those messages. And the influencer that you target should have an audience that closely mirrors the one that you're trying to reach. The next factor is preferred social channels. So what channels do your influencers most frequently use to engage with their own audiences? And what's the best way for your brand to reach the influencer? So where are your brand's primary audiences? Are they on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn? And are the influencers that you want to reach on those channels? So make sure you're looking at the right channels. And then the last factor is biographical information. So that's basically anything else about the influencer that your brand or your organization might be able to identify with. And it's about getting to know the influencer on a personal level, not just professionally. So you create deeper, longer-lasting relationships.
All right, so let's dig into Cision Communication Cloud and how we find an influencer page, how we find those influencers, and how we could use the different features within our platform. So Cision Communication Cloud allows you to find influencers talking about your brand right now. So it's a really cool feature, and so I think it's easier for me to sort of walk through how this works by pretending like I'm an account or a campaign, right? So let's use Under Armour as an example. They've done a great job over the years monitoring competitors, listening to their target audience, and just building their brand. So if I work for Under Armour and I have, let's say, my next campaign is golf. I either have a new golf product I want to put out, golf gear, or maybe it's opening some new stores in certain states or cities. So leveraging Cision's monitoring technology and Cision's curated global media research data. So that's research data, so that's media outlets and journalists brought together by Cision, Vocus, and Gorkana. It's global data. You're able to find who's talking about golf news and social media right now. So this screenshot right here, it shows you I did a search for golf, executed the search, and it brought back anyone that was talking about golf in the news recently. So if you take a look at Mike Statura, he recently wrote about the news, and you can see under recent news, recent online articles he's written. So it's a really great way to just see what people are talking about in the space today and how that works for your brand. If online news, or maybe you want to focus on a social media campaign, you can toggle the search to social media. So if you want to find influencers talking about golf at this very moment on social, you can see a list of contacts, and then at the bottom for, let's say, Debert Cook, you can see recent tweets about golf. So let's take a closer look. Let's go back to our friend Mike Statura. He came up when we did a golf news search. So what's great about this, you can view each of the influencer pages and see how they fit for you. So in this snapshot you see for Mike, he's a senior editor at Golf Digest, and Cision pitching profile. So that's information that's curated by Cision Media Research Team. We're constantly calling, emailing, working with journalists to update their information, to see what they're covering for the publication. And like I had mentioned before, they provide us with pitching tips. Some of their pet peeves, how they want to be pitched, the best time to contact them. And we also provide biographical information. And then the notes section, that's an area where you can provide your own private notes, and you can share that information with members of your team. If you're all working on the same campaign and maybe need someone to take over, you can share that information. And you could also share private contact information. So a lot of times at Cision, we won't list someone's cell phone number just for privacy concerns. But if you're able to get that information and it's something that influencer wants to be reached by, you can plug that into this influencer's page. And then let's drill down even more, and I think this is the really cool stuff and what you can do with influencers. There's an insights, history, and tweet section. So that Twitter stream is basically all of the recent tweets Mike has written about. From here, you can connect with Mike. You can reply to his tweet, you can retweet it, you can favorite it, or you could just follow along and see what he's writing about or tweeting about. And like Stacy mentioned, it's not all about numbers, but it's there if you need a starting off point. History. So within history, you can see everything that relates to Mike. So under news, you can see the recent articles he's written online. My coverage, if you have keywords set up for monitoring, that'll show up under here. You can see when you've emailed him. So if you've set something up through email distribution, you can see when you've sent it. And then another really cool thing is you can connect your Twitter account to Cision Communications Cloud. So you can see when you've tweeted him, when he's tweeted you. It's really a catalog of all of that activity. So think of history as just an influencer CRM. It's tracking all of that information for this influencer. And then under insights, I think a lot of this was covered by Stacy, but it gives you a really great look at his audience. So it's not necessarily about this influencer, it's about his audience. So looking at this, you can see that, okay, it looks like his audience is predominantly in, Arizona and Florida. And that may be perfect because maybe we're opening Under Armour stores in those two states. So this is the perfect influencer for you. And you could also see that his audience is pretty relevant to golf based on the brands that are mentioned, PGA Championship, LPGA. So it's all this information that not only gives you about that influencer, but that influencer's audience.
So one of the other really cool parts about the cloud that I'm particularly jazzed about, because I actually use it every day, is uncovering really timely opportunities. So one little secret to find influencer communities as well as become an influencer yourself is to use Help a Reporter Out, otherwise known as HARO. And just a little bit of background, HARO has about 50,000 journalists, bloggers, and influencers that utilize HARO to find sources for their content. So if they're looking for someone to quote, they're looking for an expert, they're looking for an additional perspective on one of their articles or pieces of media, they come to HARO to search for it. So if you find a topic that's relevant to you or your brand, you can pitch them to be included on their site and be exposed to their audience. The cool thing about this is that if you use it consistently, you can also become an influencer through your expertise or commentary on a particular subject. So it's really a win-win.
So another opportunity to look into are editorial calendars. They are known as forward features in the UK, if you're based there and you're dialing in for some reason. But it's a really great snapshot of what a publication or outlet or even blog is going to feature within that year. So it provides a schedule based on different themes, specific stories they're going to be running maybe in December. A really popular portion of the editorial calendar season is Holiday Gift Guide. And this is really great if you're trying to pitch a new product or just not even necessarily new or just a product in general. You'll get an idea of when they'll cover that in the magazine and who the best contact is to connect with. So it's a really great opportunity. Aside from the media database in HARO, another opportunity is through editorial calendars.
So one of the other questions that I get really frequently when we talk about targeting influencers is how many of them to target. And what I really recommend is just focusing on a few really key contacts, a handful. that match the criteria that you were looking for, especially if you're just now getting started in an influencer relations program. Start with a small pilot group and then figure out an engagement schedule that works for your goals. Some brands engage daily, some weekly, some monthly. Figure out what you can scale before you expand your program to campaigns and incentives so you keep influencers engaged for a longer period of time. The reason that I recommend that you start off small is, one, so you get a feel for how to interact with influencers, what they're looking for, how best to work with them, and two, so that you're not just spraying and praying, basically. It's really the same thing as media relationships. Journalists aren't going to open emails that are clearly mass releases. Influencers are the same. They want to feel some sort of exclusivity with brands as well. And one of my tips here is when you're choosing influencers and you're targeting them, instead of going for the 5 A-list influencers, meaning like if you do a search in your communications cloud or you do a search online and you see the top 5 influencers, scroll down a little bit and maybe choose someone a little bit lower on the list. The reason I say this is because what's going to happen is if you have a lot of competition in your industry, your competitors may also be looking for those influencers. And those influencers are going to be barraged with brand messages and brand partners. And what can happen is you lose the competition. Maybe they don't identify with your brand. Maybe your competitor's paying them more, or they just don't pay attention to you. The other thing is sometimes the brand messages can get muddled because they're spending less time on your brand and they're less dedicated to it because they're spread too thin. They're doing a lot of other content for other brands. So if you go down a little bit lower, don't just focus on the A-list. I call them the up-and-comers. Focusing on the up-and-comers, it'll help you find influencers that are more dedicated to your brand and they're willing to work harder because they want to boost their influence to that A-list status, and they're just willing to work harder for your brand, and you'll just get more bang for your effort. So exclusivity is key. Don't spray and pray. That's your fast track to getting added to a blocked sender list. And you don't want to be labeled as lazy or spray and pray and have all your future pitches, even if they're appropriate, be ignored. So really just focus on that power of a few. So narrow your search, as we mentioned earlier. Be super specific. One example here, if you're looking to promote an organic restaurant, don't just look for restaurants. Look for those covering organic food, locally owned. And those organic food influencers will be following and have followers who live, breathe, and love everything organic. I love this example because it's so true. Once you find a group of people that are really passionate about it, they latch onto it, and you want to be as specific as possible. So keep in mind that while they may not have a huge audience, they will have an audience who will absorb and share that on-target news.
So in Cision Communication Cloud, there's, under the Connect, if you have access to that, is what we call streams. So this is a really great, cool feature where, okay, you've done all your work, where you've really picked and chosen those influencers that are best for your brand, and you've created set lists of maybe 15 to 20 contacts. And if you're at a brand like Under Armour, you're not just going to focus on golf, right? You want to focus on all the different sports. So you have influencers in golf, hockey, Canadian Football League, etc. You have them all as saved lists. Well, what you can do is you can build streams out of them. And it's basically an aggregate view of all of those that are tweeting today. And you can see what they're tweeting about, who they're tweeting. Is it relevant to maybe a social campaign you want to do now? Maybe you want to be part of that conversation. And so within this page, just like the contact page, you can retweet, you can reply, you can favorite. The only thing I'd have to say, though, is if you decide to engage in that way, make sure it's in an authentic way. Make sure that you're not just pitching them or you're only doing the retweeting. I think most of us are familiar with the rule of thirds in social media. So the rule of thirds consists of 1/3 you're promoting, 1/3 you're engaging, and 1/3 you're sharing. And I think this is a really great quote from one of the bloggers who, when we asked her if she wanted to be pitched via Twitter, she said, yeah, I encourage that, but if I check the Twitter feed and see that every tweet from the past week is pitching to other people, I'm not interested. So it's just something to be aware of, that if you do want to engage or pitch via Twitter or social media, just be aware that you want to practice the rule of thirds. I know a lot of times, especially with earned media, it is hard to maybe equate a dollar sign to it. But one way you can do it within Cision Communication Cloud is through what we offer, Web Analytics. So if you have a website and it's tied to Google Analytics, you can link that into your account. And it's great because you're able to see the traffic and who's driving that traffic to your site. As you can see here, Forbes, there's an article in Forbes, and it had an inbound link to your site, and that's where all the traffic's coming from. And then you see goal completion. This is something that you set up yourself, so maybe it's you just want to get leads. So it tracks what your goal is based on what you set up and just the action taken, and then equates it to a dollar value. So it's another great way, if you have Google Analytics, link that up to Cision Communication Cloud. And this is sort of my baby since I oversee the media research team, but there's a media updates tab that shows you daily changes that the team is making. These are just some of the top changes. We are making hundreds of updates a day across globally, but we really wanted to show that these are changes that you should be aware of. I think it's a great way to obviously update maybe your lists. I really encourage you, if you have media lists, save it within the platform and not outside of it, because once you save it onto your desktop, it's out of date. Saving it within the platform, the list will update on their own. People who have maybe moved outlets or no longer write for an outlet, they'll drop from your list. So that's a really great reason to keep it within Cision's platform. But another great thing about media updates, maybe it's a great way for you to build a relationship, right? Like you can see someone just joined maybe an outlet that's relevant to your audience, connect with them. You may not need to pitch something today, but I think just introducing yourself, having them know who you are, might be relevant down the road. All right, so a lot of this was covered by Stacy, but I just want to make the point that just based on the State of the Media report, what we hear from influencers daily, this is what they're looking for. I think this first bullet point of do your homework, part one, we'll go over part two a little later, it's know what they cover and know their audience. And everything listed below really encompasses that. So be aware of lead times in media types. There are certain media types where they need advanced time to write a story, especially with magazines. A lot of times they need 60 to 90 days. It goes to print a good month before it hits newsstands. So keep that in mind. And even today we see bloggers wanting enough lead time, especially if you're sending them a product to review. They need time to review that product. So if you're sending them an email, don't ask them, is it going to be pitched tomorrow or is it going to be written tomorrow? They need at least a week or two, or even 3 in some cases. And we're finding a lot of online media publishing editorial calendars, and we've started adding that to Cision's media database. Location, Stacy mentioned that, national versus local. There's no reason for you to pitch a local story to someone who covers national stories, unless there's a national angle to it, and vice versa. If you're pitching someone that works for, I don't know, a Chicago newspaper and you have a national trend, how does it relate to the Chicago audience? And then I really want to dig into editorial roles. I think this is something that is really important because not everyone at one publication will cover the same thing. Yeah, they may cover the same topic at face value, but they may not want the same information. So I'm going to really focus on traditional media, print, and broadcast. Something to keep in mind for print, if you think of titles in sort of a hierarchy, right? You want to pitch anyone except at the very top, so that's a publisher, or the very bottom, not that there's anything wrong with this role, but an editorial assistant. So everything in the middle has its place. So there are top editors, so those are the managing editors, section editors. They're great for pitching a larger piece, something that has a national appeal or something entirely unique to the outlet. Middle tier editors, those are your deputy editors, assistant editors, assignment editors. They can be pitched specific coverage and targeted information because typically they'll assign that information to members of their team, so reporters and writers and columnists. But in general, for newspapers, pitch the top contacts for larger, more paper-specific issues, and then for those middle editors, general coverage of a topic or desk. For magazines, very similar. You'll want to pitch editors, managing editors, senior editors, features editors. Those are usually the people you want to go with, assignment editors. The list goes on. We list all of these business card titles in Cision's media database, so you can do a text search for that. Typically, like I said, they'll end up distributing that information to their reporters to write on. Reporters, writers, and columnists, they can be pitched too, but make sure it's really specific to what they individually cover. So make sure you do your homework and see what their style is and what their tone is. Broadcast, let's talk about them. I think this could be a beast for people not familiar with that industry or that media type. Let's dig into TV and radio shows. The best contacts to pitch are generally producers and executive producers and guest bookers. For big network shows, so that's like MSNBC today, these producers and bookers typically cover a certain topic. So if you're pitching an entertainment story or a guest to GMA, you'll want to look for the entertainment producers or bookers. For TV station and networks, the best contacts are news assignment editors, news planning editors, news editors. Pretty much all assignment desk contacts. Again, just like print, reporters are good, but for unique stories. I think the caveat with pitching reporters or maybe assignment editors, it's if you're not getting anywhere with them directly, think about pitching the assignment desk contact or the assignment desk email. It could be that reporter or assignment editor is out on leave or out on vacation, and there's typically someone on standby monitoring that email. And then for radio stations and networks, a little different from television. The best contacts are news directors, topical editors, typically found at networks, program directors. A lot of stations also have assistant program directors. And then obviously for music, you want to pitch the music director. And then to pitch local community events, that's your public service contacts. So again, we list all of this information in an influencer's business card title. So just think about the information you're going to send, the type of story you want to send, and think about these different titles. Who should you not pitch? Publishers, editor-in-chiefs like those Anna Wintours, editorial directors, general managers. Basically, people who aren't really assigning those stories within the publication, don't pitch them. And then lastly, don't be tone deaf. Visit their site and read past articles. A good example is we had a fitness blogger tell us that she typically focuses on healthy, body-positive messages, and then she received a pitch about having the perfect bikini body. And so she thought, oh, is there a perfect bikini body? Because I didn't know that. So you kind of get to know the tone, know that either change your messaging or just don't send it to that person.
So no matter what type of influencer you're talking to, whether it's a journalist, like Val was talking about, a social media influencer, an expert, one thing to really, truly remember when you're targeting and you're starting to engage and you want to bring these influencers on board, influencer marketing is not a one-off tactic. Repeat after me. Influencer marketing is not a one-off tactic. You need to consistently nurture and stay in contact with your influencers on a daily or weekly basis at the very least. Thankfully, the cloud helps you do that. I use it myself, and one of my tips is that streams feature that Val was talking about, to always kind of have that open on a separate screen so you can see what they're talking about in real time, and then that enables you to keep in touch on a more frequent basis. So remember I talked about creating an engagement schedule. So when you see them post, add thoughtful insights to their posts, share their work with your communities, provide data to them, provide multimedia, story opportunities, and basically just show that you're taking an interest in what they're doing before you ever ask to partner with them. The ability to stay on their radar so that your brand remains top of mind is really crucial, again, because of all the information and all the competition that's out there on the web. So having the social media management engagement kind of right in front of you helps you monitor their activity and then engage with them, completely necessary. So when you do that and you're continuing to build rapport and you have a relationship and they know who you are and you haven't asked for anything yet, once an event hits, whether it's a campaign you want to run or maybe it's a crisis or there's an event or a trend, when you turn to your contacts and you turn to your influencers, those brand advocates and those influencers will be much more likely to collaborate with you.
So crafting or creating the perfect pitch, just some pointers to just remind everyone about. I think we're all aware of them. But do your homework part 2. It's really important to know what your message is, what your story is, who the expert you're trying to pitch, what he's about. It's really, really apparent to influencers when someone's pitching something they don't understand or care about. Believe it or not, they know when someone's passionate about their story or their message. They can sort of get that through the way the pitch was crafted. So be knowledgeable about the background of the product or story that you're pitching. And if you're not up on the more technical features or aspects, be prepared to put that influencer in touch with someone who can talk about it. And they're very aware when you give an intern a call list because a lot of times they will ask them questions and they don't have the answer. So just keep that in mind. This is a good quote from a Wall Street journalist, influencer covering mergers and acquisitions. She quotes, "My pet peeve is when a PR person calls to pitch a company and they do not know the ticker symbol." So it seems like it's a pretty obvious thing if you're going to pitch someone at Wall Street Journal to know the basics. Personalize and foster new relationships. Their biggest pet peeve, aside from not knowing what they cover, is having a cold pitch with no intro. They realize that it's time efficient to copy and paste it, to send it to a blast, but just have an intro, have them feel like you're taking the time you value their time by putting time into your pitch or story. We get a lot of requests for pitches to be addressed by their name, not hey, or hey there, or hey blogger. They hate that. And also spell check. Believe it or not, people have misspelled Steve. I think he said Steve was in my email address and they still misspelled my name. So please spell check. It's obvious stuff, but people are still sending it, and unfortunately, one bad PR communication person can ruin it for the bunch. And then just build trustworthy relationships with them, even if it's responding with a no to the journalist. They just want to move on. They want to trust you as a resource, and being trusted as a resource is a really valuable asset in PR. Keep it brief and stay relevant. I love this just sort of quote, say it once and say it well. Just have everything be in one story. Have the subject line that reads like a headline. Accurate subject lines help your pitch stand out, and it's easy to sort of flag and categorize in an inbox. A lot of them just are visual learners. I am. They like it in bullet points. So have everything listed out in bullet points. Have all of the facts there for them. You want to think about when you pitch a reporter, it just doesn't stop at that reporter. They have to pitch their editor. So make sure you have all that information so they can pitch it to their editor and you can get the coverage that you want in that publication. And just to reinforce, they say that pitches that are long or oddly formatted, they skip over it. I know I will supposedly save really long emails but never get back to them, so keep it short. And when it comes to attachments, should you or should you not do it? I don't know. There's not an answer, but a lot of people have firewalls on their emails. So the best thing you can do, I think you should do, is have a link to maybe a cloud. Maybe it's Dropbox, maybe it's Google Drive, something that it doesn't clog their inbox. And something else, avoid spam words. That's another way to get into a journalist's junk folder. So really, a sloppy press release that comes from an unorganized PR person is probably someone they don't want to work with. Oh, and date press releases. They hate when you don't date press releases. If they dig back into their email and they find a press release that's relevant, they don't know when it was published. So make sure you do that. Be authentic, kind, and honest. If you're going to reach out to them, don't promise them something and then take it back. They hate that. Or if you send out a message or a story to them, and they respond with more information, respond back to them. Don't be a black hole. Like, why take the time to email them when you don't respond? And then when you want to pitch experts, one great advice was start with the CEO. I think having someone at the top says a lot, and they'll want to reach out to them. If you're pitching data, it helps if it's quoted elsewhere. Or if you're featuring a scientist or an expert, have a bio link because they want to know more about that person. So I think more the better, but keep it brief. So that's why linking is really great. And then lastly, be available and always follow through. I think I mentioned this. If they get back to you, they want to respond immediately. Don't wait, not even like 2 or 3 hours. They're on a deadline. They want a response right away. And so you not responding just burns bridges with them, and they may not want to work with you down the road. And then this is just to summarize the pet peeves that we get. Sending irrelevant pitches, I think we've covered that. Make sure you know what they cover and who their audience is about. Spray and pray, they know when they're being spray and prayed. They know when they're BCC'd. Make sure you customize. Being overly persistent. It's kind of like that saying, he's just not into you. If they don't get back to you, it's just probably not a good fit. So more times than not, it's probably not a good fit. Maybe follow up once, but don't follow up like 2 hours later or even the next day. Give it some time. Using outdated lists, terrible. That's why save your list within Cision if you can, or just keep up to date on the list. And then honor opt-out requests. If they've asked you nicely to remove them from the list, please remove them from the list. That just upsets them, and it gets them to be blocked from all of your campaigns, not just that one campaign. So it's just some food for thought, some best PR 101. Turn it over to Mary Morgan.
Thanks, Val and Stacy. Once we're going to take some final questions. We have a few more minutes here. We got a lot of product-specific questions, so we want you guys to be power users of our product. We're going to, if you click yes, we're going to have your account manager reach out to you and take you through the specific search steps and just teach you how to use this feature better. If you're not a customer and you want to learn more about Cision, the search function, or just the Cision Communication Cloud as a whole, click yes. We'll have someone reach out to you. And then without further ado, Stacy, you want to take over the questions?
Yeah, we have a lot of great questions. So I want to make sure that we get to as many as we can in the last couple of minutes. The first question, I really love that you asked it, Steve. Steve wants to know, what should be the expectation for how this can work in a B2B environment? And the answer is amazingly. I know we gave some B2C examples here, but I'll give you a B2B example, and that would be Cision. And actually, I'll have us tweet out a link to a really great article that I actually wrote yesterday prefacing this webinar. So we are a B2B company. We sell to other companies, and we've been using influencer marketing since about 2008, and there were some really interesting things that came out of this really great relationship building, this really great targeting that we were able to prove and actually show real ROI. So one of the things was, excuse me, we used influencer relations to find advocates for an industry conference or an industry event and have them share key messages, things that were resonating through the industry, and have them share key conference-related content and engage in contests. And because we found this really great industry-related group who was willing to share about our brand and then attend the conference, we were able to generate something like 157% increase in mentions about the conference and 100% increase in traffic to the website, 31 pieces of media coverage for the conference, and like 181% increase in media coverage for it over the previous year. So we utilized influencer relationships to help boost live event attendance. We also used it for our product launches. Mainly, we actually used it for the launch of the cloud. So we develop really great relationships with top PR experts in the industry and marketing experts, and we say, hey, why don't you take a look at the cloud? Let us know what you think about it. And the ones who were really interested in it and thought it would be great, they ended up advocating for the cloud. And their messages, coupled with our launch activities, helped generated a 300% increase in product-related coverage by media, bloggers, and influencers. And this was important because it spread the word about products and services. In addition to that, we use it for brand awareness. We use influencer marketing for client retention because they advocate for us and they help clients in need without us having to step in sometimes on social media. And we've also used it for crisis communication as well, where influencers step in and advocate for the brand in times of crisis. So there are a lot of really good applications for B2B when it comes to influencer marketing. We'll tweet that article out, and we'd love to kind of answer more about that. The next question comes from Manda, and that's about pay for play. So will you touch on pay for play, budgets, et cetera? So we mentioned this earlier, celebrities, comes with pay for play. Also, really those top tier A-list influencers are usually pay to play. There's nothing wrong with pay to play. Sometimes it's really worth paying to partner with an influencer because nowadays, influencer marketing, this is their profession. So they don't have a second job, and being an influencer for brands is what they do as a profession. It's their 9 to 5, and it's how they feed their family. So if there's an influencer that requires you to pay for play, it's okay. That being said, you're going to want to think about the long-lasting effect of the relationship and making sure that it's not a one-off. Because one thing that we've experienced personally as a large brand doing influencer marketing is that you have influencers who are pay for play, but what happens is you'll pay for them, you'll have them engage with you for a certain period of time, and then that influence really drops off once the contract has ended. So you haven't created a long-lasting relationship. You haven't created, a lot of trust and credibility, and it just kind of falls off the map. So unless you're willing to engage in a really long-term campaign for a year, 2 years, 3 years, the trust and the credibility that comes with a pay-for-play campaign can be diminished. Also remember that if you're paying an influencer to engage on behalf of your brand, that you have to disclose that, otherwise you will get in trouble with the FCC and you will get fined. So you have to do like hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored if you're paying someone to share branded content, otherwise you will get in trouble. And if you want to learn more about that, I would suggest Carrie Gorgone. She's a really great resource. We'll tweet that out as well. She knows a lot about influencer marketing law and can explain more about that.
Yeah, and just working on the media database side, we're seeing more and more niche bloggers, not necessarily those highly influential ones with numbers, but niche bloggers who just do sponsored content because that's their main source of income, like Stacey was saying. There's nothing wrong with that because as long as they disclose it, they still want to do an honest review, but they want to be compensated for it because it is their main source and they've worked really hard to build that influence with their audience. So you'll see a lot of maybe websites or blogs that will have a PR-friendly tab and they say they do sponsored content. That's what that is. There's a question by Virginia. I think, sorry if I said your name wrong. Virginia, you asked how many journalists did you survey regarding the press release? We surveyed about 400 global journalists for that. And then Madison, let's piggyback on the press releases. You asked, do they prefer press releases to be posted below the signature or attached? I think they don't mind if it's in the body as long as you have an intro to it and that you just sort of have a customized pitch to intro it. So I think you can do either attached, linked, or have it within the body.
So it looks like we may have time for just one more question before we hit the top of the hour. I'll take this one from Lucia. And her question was, how does someone sign up with you as an influencer? And so the answer is it's not quite signing up because the way that our influencer database works, influence is determined by a variety of factors, including the relevancy of posts that you share, how the volume of posts that you share on a specific topic, your followers, your reach, your original content. All of these factors really go into the inclusion into the influencer database. So not specifically signing up, if you'd like to create influence and garner influence, we'd suggest using some of our tools such as Help a Reporter Out to start sharing your expertise with other reporters and influencers in order to start getting your name out there. And then by sharing that content, you will then become an influencer organically. And with that, I will turn it back to Mary Morgan. I think we're done.
Thanks, Val and Stacey. Yeah, we're at the end of the hour, but again, I want to make this clear. We will be sending this on-demand version out, so you can you'll get it from us via email in the next day or so. You can go back and watch all the content. Additionally, you can find an archive of all of our webinars on our website at cision.com. Additionally, some excellent research and slides from past webinars can be found on SlideShare. That's slideshare.com/Cision. And of course, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We are Cision, a leading media, communications, and analytics company that enables marketers and communicators to effectively manage their earned media programs to drive business impact. As the creator of the Cision Communication Cloud, the first of its kind earned media cloud-based platform, Cision has combined cutting-edge data analytics and services into a unified ecosystem that brands can use to build meaningful relationships with influencers and buyers. Cision solutions also include PR Newswire, Gorkana, PR Web, Haro, Help a Reporter Out, and iContact. Thank you all for joining us. Have a nice afternoon.